I'm Major Ava Serrano, 33 years old, and I built my career from the ground up by showing up, doing the work, and earning every stripe on my uniform. For years, I held my family together, covering for my sister, supporting her, defending her. But when she stole my fiancé, my commanding officer, behind my back, I made one decision that changed the entire trajectory of my life. Have you ever been dismissed or betrayed by someone you would have protected without hesitation? If you have, tell me your story in the comments. You're in good company. Before I dive into what happened, let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to reclaim your dignity after someone tried to tear it down, hit like and subscribe. What came next even I didn't see coming. I stood in front of my locker at Nellis Air Force Base 7 years ago, adjusting my service dress uniform for what felt like the 100th time that morning. First Lieutenant Ava Serrano, 26 years old, on track for captain, focused on my career in a way that left little room for doubt. My father had taught me that. Chief Master Sergeant Robert Serrano didn't raise daughters who second-guessed themselves. He raised women who understood that respect was earned through consistency, not demanded through volume. My sister Lena arrived at the officers' club that evening wearing a dress that cost more than my monthly uniform allowance. She wasn't military. She'd never been interested in service, only in the benefits that came with proximity to it. But lately, she'd been showing up to more of my professional events than ever before. She called it support. I was beginning to call it something else. "Ava, you look so serious," she said, touching the edge of my sleeve. "Does Reed ever tell you to relax? You're engaged to a captain now. You can afford to smile more." Reed Mercer had made captain 6 months earlier. The promotion suited him in ways that went beyond the pay grade. He stood differently now, spoke with a new kind of authority that sometimes felt performative. When Lena complimented his uniform that night, I watched him straighten his shoulders, watched him hold her attention a fraction too long. It was subtle. The kind of thing you notice only because you know someone well enough to recognize when they're enjoying being seen. "I smile when there's something worth smiling about," I said. Lena laughed. "That's so you. Always so disciplined." "I could never date someone enlisted, you know. The rank matters." "You're lucky Reed's an officer." I didn't respond. Reed was across the room talking to Lieutenant Colonel Patrick O'Neill, my commanding officer, but I saw him glance our way. Saw him register Lena's presence the way people register sunlight after being indoors too long. Over the next few weeks, Lena started appearing at places she had no reason to be. A change of command ceremony where she knew no one. A dining out event that required tickets she somehow acquired. Each time, she gravitated toward Reed. Each time, he allowed it. "Your sister's really interested in military culture," Reed said one night as we drove back to my apartment. "Is she?" "She asks good questions. About protocol, about what it takes to move up in rank. She's curious." "She's curious about status," I said. "There's a difference." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Not everyone sees the world the way you do, Ava. Some people need to understand the structure before they can respect it." That was new. That tone. Like he was explaining something to a subordinate rather than talking to the woman he planned to marry. I let it go. I told myself he was adjusting to his new rank, finding his footing as a captain. I told myself a lot of things that turned out to be generous interpretations of behavior I should have questioned harder. My promotion ceremony rehearsal happened on a Tuesday morning at 0900 hours. Lena showed up wearing jeans and a base softball team jacket she'd borrowed from somewhere. And an officer's cap. Not hers. Not mine. Just a prop she thought was funny. "Look, I'm Captain Lena," she said, saluting sloppily. The other officers smiled politely. Reed laughed. Not a quick chuckle, but a real laugh that went on too long, that encouraged her to keep the hat on, to keep playing the role. I watched them both. Watched the way she performed for him. Watched the way he rewarded the performance. "Lena, give it back," I said quietly. "Relax, Ava. It's just a joke. It's not funny." Reed touched my arm. "Come on. She's just trying to lighten the mood. You've been so tense lately." That was the first time he sided with her over me in public. I felt it like a shift in air pressure before a storm. Something foundational had moved, and I couldn't identify exactly when or how. Lena started using his first name. Not Captain Mercer. Not even Reed when we were all together in professional settings. Just Reed, casual and familiar, like they'd known each other longer than they had. Like she had access to him that superseded my own. He didn't correct her. I brought it up once, carefully. It seems like Lena's around a lot lately. She's family, Reed said. I thought you'd want me to get along with your family. Getting along is different from what, Ava? From being friendly? From treating your sister like a person instead of someone beneath my notice. I stopped talking. He'd reframed my concern as elitism, as me being the problem. It was skillful. I didn't recognize it then as deflection. I recognized it as me being told I was wrong about my own observations. Lena called him before she called me. I noticed because my phone logs were part of my security clearance updates, and I saw her number in my recent contacts less and less, while Reed's screen lit up with her name more and more. When I asked about it, he said she was asking advice about a job application. Then it was advice about an apartment lease. Then it was just talking because they got along. She understands ambition, Reed said. She gets what it takes to build something. And I don't. You're good at following orders, Ava. That's not the same thing. I was a first lieutenant who'd scored in the top percentile of my peer group on leadership evaluations. I'd run training operations that Reed hadn't even observed. But he'd started to see me differently. Or maybe he'd always seen me this way and I'd been too focused on building a future with him to notice. My father came to visit during this time. Chief Master Sergeant Serrano retired, but still carrying himself like a man who'd spent 30 years teaching younger airmen what integrity looked like. He shook Reed's hand, asked him about his career trajectory, listened carefully to his answers. Later, when Reed left to take a phone call, my father looked at me across the kitchen table. He talks about rank like it's identity, Dad said. He's proud of his accomplishments. Pride's fine. Needing everyone to know you're proud is something else. He sipped his coffee. How's Lena? She's around more than usual. My father nodded slowly. He didn't push. He taught me to trust my instincts by never telling me what my instincts should be. He just said, you've always known the difference between people who serve and people who perform. Don't forget that. The final warning came quietly. Reed and I were supposed to have dinner at 1800 hours. He texted at 17:30 to cancel. Inspection prep, he said. I believed him until I ran into Lieutenant Morrison at the gym that evening. Didn't expect to see you here, Morrison said. Thought you'd be with Mercer. He's preparing for inspection. Morrison's face did something subtle. Right. Yeah. Inspection. I found out later he'd been at Flanagan, the bar 2 miles off base, where officers went to pretend they weren't always officers. Lena's car was in the parking lot. I didn't drive by on purpose. I drove by because it was on my way home, and I saw it, and I knew. I didn't confront him that night. I told myself I needed evidence, needed to be sure, needed to approach it rationally. What I actually needed was time to prepare for something I already knew was happening. You don't spend your life learning to assess tactical situations without recognizing when you're in one. I started noticing everything. The way Reed's phone was always face down now. The way Lena stopped texting me but her social media showed her at places near the base, near his schedule, near his life. The way he criticized my career choices more often, my decisions, my priorities. You'll understand once you have real responsibility, he said when I mentioned possibly applying for a training command position. Real responsibility. I was managing logistics for a squadron. He was a captain with a staff job. But somehow, in his mind, in the story he was building, I was the one who didn't understand what leadership meant. When Lena showed up at the promotion ceremony wearing that borrowed cap, making that joke, and Reed laughed too long, I knew. Not suspected. Knew. The way you know an aircraft's going down before the alarm sound. The way you feel a fracture before the break. She called him Reed in front of me. He smiled. He didn't correct her. And in that moment, I understood I was watching two people become a team while I stood outside the formation. The question wasn't whether they would cross a line. The question was whether I'd still be standing there when they did. The call came at 1300 hours on a Thursday. My commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Patrick O'Neill, asked me to come to his office. Not requested. Asked. There's a difference in the military. Requests are optional. When your CO asks, you show up. I walked across the quad in my combat uniform, mentally cataloging everything I'd done in the past month that might require his attention. I came up empty. My performance reviews were solid. My flight certifications were current. I hadn't missed any deadlines or briefings. Whatever this was, it wasn't about my work. O'Neill gestured to the chair across from his desk. He looked uncomfortable in a way that senior officers rarely do. Lieutenant Serrano, I need to inform you of a situation involving Captain Mercer. My stomach dropped, but I kept my face neutral. Yes, sir. He came to me this morning to report a personal conflict. He's requesting to dissolve your engagement due to what he described as incompatibility in long-term goals. The room felt smaller. He reported it to you before discussing it with me. He followed protocol for potential conflicts of interest, given your working relationship on base. O'Neill's voice was careful, professional. I'm informing you as a courtesy and to ensure you're aware before any official documentation is filed. Documentation. If the engagement is formally ended, it needs to be noted in both your personnel files. Relationship status affects certain assignments and clearances. I sat there absorbing the tactical precision of what Reed had done. He'd turned our relationship into a chain of command issue, made it official before making it personal, protected himself professionally while dismantling everything personally. Understood, sir, I said. O'Neill cleared his throat. For what it's worth, Lieutenant, this reflects nothing on your performance or professionalism. Your record speaks for itself. Thank you, sir. I walked out of that office and went straight to the parking lot. Not to my car. Just to stand outside in the Nevada heat and breathe. Reed had ended our engagement through my commanding officer. He hadn't even had the basic human decency to say it to my face first. My phone buzzed. A text from Reed. We should talk. Can you come by tonight? I didn't respond. He called at 1900 hours. I didn't answer. At 2100 hours, he showed up at my apartment. I opened the door because refusing felt like giving him power over my space. You talked to O'Neill, he said. You made sure I would. He had the awareness to look slightly ashamed. Slightly. I had to follow procedure. You had to break up with me through the chain of command? I'm reassessing my future, Ava. What I need in a partner. Where I want my career to go. We're not aligned anymore. We were aligned last month. No. He shook his head. You were aligned with your plan. I was trying to fit into it. That's not the same thing. I stared at him. This man I'd planned to marry. This man who'd told me he loved my discipline, my focus, my commitment to service. Now he was standing in my doorway telling me those same qualities made me incompatible with his future. Is this about Lena? I asked. His face did something I'd never seen before. Guilt and relief mixed together. This is about me needing someone who understands ambition beyond following a checklist. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting. He pulled my engagement ring from his pocket. Set it on the table by the door. I'm sorry it didn't work out. He left. I stood there looking at the ring, this thing that had meant forever 6 months ago, and now meant nothing except proof that I'd been wrong about someone I thought I knew. The photo appeared on Lena's social media 3 days later. Her hand. My ring. No face, just the diamond catching light, and a caption that made my chest tighten. Upward mobility comes to those who deserve it. I stared at that post for a long time. Read it over and over. She wasn't just taking Reed. She was taking him as proof of her worth. As evidence that she'd won something I'd lost. That she deserved what I couldn't keep. I didn't comment. Didn't call. Didn't give her the satisfaction of a reaction. I just sat on my couch in my empty apartment and let myself feel the full weight of betrayal from 2 people who were supposed to matter. Reed moved in with Lena within 3 weeks. I heard about it through Morrison, who heard about it from someone else, the way bad news travels on a base. They didn't hide it. Why would they? They weren't breaking any rules. Just hearts. They got married 11 months later. Small ceremony, immediate family only. I wasn't invited. My father wasn't invited. Lena sent a photo to our family group chat, her in white, Reed in his dress blues, both of them smiling like they'd accomplished something difficult. My Aunt Marjorie called me that night. Are you okay, Mija? I'm fine. You don't have to be fine. I'm really fine, Aunt Marjorie. I promise. I wasn't fine. But I was functioning. And in the military, functioning counts as fine until you have time to be otherwise. Reed made Major 14 months after marrying Lena. 04. The promotion came fast, but not suspiciously so. He was good at his job. He knew how to manage perceptions, how to network, how to make himself visible to the right people. Lena made sure everyone knew. Every social media post was a humble brag about her husband, the major. Every family gathering included some reference to his rank, his responsibilities, his importance. I made captain around the same time. Oh, 3. A solid promotion, right on schedule. My father called to congratulate me. Lena sent a text, "Good for you. Maybe you'll catch up someday." I blocked her number after that. Months passed. A year. I saw them occasionally on base or at official functions. They moved through military social circles like they'd always belonged there. Lena had learned the language, the protocols, the unspoken rules about rank and respect. She played the officer's wife role perfectly. Too perfectly. Like someone who'd studied for a test rather than lived the material. Reed stopped making eye contact with me at official events. Not out of shame, I don't think. More like I'd become irrelevant to his narrative. He'd moved on. She'd moved on. And I was supposed to accept that my role in their story was to be the person they'd left behind. There was a family gathering 2 years after their wedding. Uncle Tomasa's retirement party. I almost didn't go. But my father was going, and I wouldn't let Lena's presence keep me from supporting family. She found me by the drinks table. Reed was across the yard talking to my uncle, probably explaining something about military retirement benefits. "Ava," Lena said warmly. Too warmly. "It's been forever." "Has it? You look good. Staying in shape. That's important when you're single." She smiled. "You'll find someone eventually. Maybe an NCO or something." "Nothing wrong with that." I looked at her. Really looked at her. Saw the designer dress, the professional makeup, the wedding ring she kept adjusting so the light would catch it. Saw the effort it took for her to stand there and deliver that line. "I'm happy for you, Lena," I said. And I left it at that. Because what else was there to say? That she'd taken my fiancé and turned him into a status symbol? That she'd made our father's illness harder by forcing me to choose between family obligation and self-respect? That she'd proven everyone right who said she only cared about appearances? She knew all of that. She just didn't care. I left the party early. My father walked me to my car. "She's trying to hurt you," he said. "I know. You're letting her." I paused with my hand on the car door. What should I do? Stop caring what she thinks. That's the only way she loses. He was right. But caring isn't something you turn off like a switch. It's something you manage, redirect, outlast. And I was tired of managing feelings about people who'd made themselves my opponents. The last communication I had from Lena came 3 years after they married. A text from a number I didn't recognize. "Don't embarrass yourself. You lost." I read it twice. Deleted it. Blocked the number. I didn't lose anything worth keeping. My father taught us about the military before we could spell it. Lena and I grew up on Air Force bases where rank wasn't just a job description, it was the organizing principle of entire communities. Who saluted whom? Who lived in which housing? Who got invited to which events? Dad was a senior master sergeant when I was born, E8, climbing toward the peak of enlisted leadership. By the time I was 12, he'd made Chief Master Sergeant, E9, the highest enlisted rank. He wore it with a kind of quiet authority that didn't need announcement. Lena hated it. Not the military itself, but the structure. The hierarchy. The idea that respect came from service rather than personality. She was 2 years older than me and spent most of our childhood trying to find ways around rules that I was busy learning to follow. Dad would give an instruction, be home by 2100 hours, keep your room inspection ready, address adults by their rank, and Lena would push back. Not outright defiance. Just constant negotiation, constant testing of boundaries. "Why do I have to call him Chief Martinez?" she'd ask. "He's Dad's friend." "Because that's his rank," Dad would say. "But it's fake respect. I don't actually respect him more just because I use his title." "Then you don't understand what respect means." I was 8 years old, listening to these conversations, learning that Lena saw military courtesy as performance while Dad saw it as foundation. She thought respect was a feeling. He knew it was a practice. We moved 7 times before I turned 16. Lena complained every time. I adapted. She made friends with other kids who resented base life. I made friends with kids who understood it. By high school, we divided into clear categories. She was the one who counted down days until she could leave, and I was the one researching ROTC programs. When I got accepted to the Air Force Academy, my father cried. Actual tears. Chief Master Sergeant Robert Serrano, who'd maintained composure through deployments and inspections and combat operations, cried in our kitchen because his younger daughter was going to be an officer. Lena was in her room. She came out when she heard him, saw his face, looked at me. "She's barely going to be an officer," she said. "Second lieutenant is basically nothing." Dad's expression went cold. "Second lieutenant is a commission. It's earned. And you'll address your sister's achievement with respect or you'll leave this house." She left. Stayed with a friend for 3 days. When she came back, she didn't apologize. Just acted like nothing had happened. That was Lena's pattern. Push until consequences arrived, then reset and pretend the push never occurred. I commissioned as a second lieutenant 2 days after graduation. 22 years old, 01, standing in my service dress uniform while my father saluted me for the first time. Protocol dictated that he initiate the salute, enlisted salute officers first, even when the officer is your daughter. I returned it, and something passed between us that Lena would never understand. Mutual respect earned through mutual commitment to something larger than ourselves. She didn't attend my commissioning ceremony. Said she had work. She was waitressing at the time, moving between jobs, between apartments, between versions of herself that never quite solidified into anything stable. I sent her photos. She responded with, "Congrats, I guess." I met Reed Mercer when I was 23, a year into my first assignment at Nellis. He was a first lieutenant then, 02, 3 years older than me, but only 1 rank ahead. He seemed grounded, mature. He'd been enlisted before commissioning, which gave him perspective that academy graduates sometimes lacked. We started dating after working together on a training exercise. He was patient with my long hours, understood the demands of the job, shared my commitment to service. Or so I thought. My father met him 6 months into our relationship. They talked for 2 hours about leadership philosophy, about the difference between authority and respect, about what it meant to serve. Reed said all the right things. Dad seemed satisfied. "He knows the language," my father said after Reed left. "Make sure he knows the meaning too." I didn't understand the warning then. Thought Dad was just being protective. Now I know he'd identified something I'd missed. Reed knew how to perform understanding without necessarily possessing it. Lena met Reed at a family barbecue. She was 28, still unmarried, still moving through life without clear direction. She'd cycled through community college classes and entry-level jobs and relationships that ended badly. She showed up to the barbecue wearing too much makeup and too high heels for a backyard event, and she focused on Reed immediately. "So you're an officer," she said, like it was an accusation and a compliment simultaneously. "First lieutenant," Reed confirmed. "What's that mean for your future?" "Hopefully captain soon. Then major if I stay competitive." "And dating another officer helps with that?" He laughed uncomfortably. "It doesn't hurt to have a partner who understands the lifestyle." I watched Lena process that. Watched her file it away. She'd always been strategic about people, collecting information she could use later. I thought she was just making conversation. I didn't realize she was conducting reconnaissance. Over the next year, our family dynamic settled into an uneasy rhythm. Dad was declining, not dramatically, but noticeably. Age and 3 decades of military stress were catching up with him. He retired fully, moved to a small house near Nellis so he could be close to me. Lena visited occasionally, usually when she needed money or advice or some kind of support she couldn't get elsewhere. I helped her. Repeatedly. Co-signed an apartment lease when her credit wasn't good enough. Wrote job references when she needed them. Lent her money she rarely paid back. She was my sister. That meant something to me, even when it clearly meant less to her. Reed proposed when I made captain. 26 years old, 03, with a solid career trajectory ahead of me. The proposal was thoughtful. He'd arranged a dinner at a restaurant near the base. Nothing over the top, just private and meaningful. I said yes because I believed we wanted the same future. Service. Partnership. A life built on shared values. Lena's reaction when I told her, "Wow, you're really doing the whole military spouse thing." "I'm doing the marriage thing," I said. "Reed just happens to be military too." "Right, but it helps that he's an officer." "You wouldn't marry enlisted." "That's not, I'm just saying what everyone's thinking, Ava. Rank matters in your world. Don't pretend it doesn't." She was wrong, but I couldn't prove it without sounding defensive. So I let it go. Let her believe what she wanted to believe. Let her reduce my engagement to a transaction because that's how she viewed relationships. Looking back, I see how every interaction was preparation. How Lena was learning the terrain of military life through me, understanding the value system, identifying what mattered and how to access it. She wasn't interested in service. She was interested in the status that came from proximity to it. And when she saw Reed saw his rank, his potential, his willingness to be admired, she saw an opportunity. I was too busy planning a wedding to notice. I was also teaching her how to take everything I valued and claim it as her own. The pattern had always been there. Me building something. Lena wanting it once she saw its value. The only difference this time was that what she wanted wasn't a borrowed dress or a college essay or money. It was my future. And unlike those other things, I couldn't let her take it and pretend it didn't matter. Except I could. And I did. Because when Reed chose her, I chose to believe it was my failure rather than their betrayal. I chose to internalize their narrative, that I was too rigid, too focused, too devoted to my career to be what someone wanted in a partner. My father knew better. Before his health declined further, before things got complicated, he pulled me aside one afternoon. "Your sister doesn't want what you have," he said. "She wants people to think she has it. There's a difference." "What's the difference?" "One requires work. The other just requires a better story." He paused. "And Reed's choosing the story version. That tells you everything you need to know about his character." Dad was right. But being right doesn't stop the hurt. It just means you have clarity while you're bleeding. I threw myself into work with the kind of intensity that concerned my colleagues and impressed my supervisors. After Reed and Lena, there wasn't much else to do except prove that my worth wasn't tied to who wanted me. My performance reviews remained strong. I volunteered for additional duties, extra training, anything that kept me moving forward professionally while everything personal was falling apart. 6 months after the breakup, I made Captain Right on schedule. 03, promoted with my peer group, exactly where I should be. My father attended the ceremony. Lena and Reed did not. They were busy with their own life, their own trajectory, their own version of success that apparently required my absence. Dad stood with me afterward in the Nevada heat, both of us in dress uniform, his retired rank insignia still carrying weight through decades of earned respect. "Rank doesn't make character," he said quietly. "Character makes rank." You remember that. I remembered. But remembering didn't make the nights easier, didn't fill the space where a future used to be, didn't stop me from wondering what I'd done wrong to deserve being abandoned by two people I'd trusted completely. The wedding invitation arrived 4 months later. Heavy cardstock, formal calligraphy, my name misspelled, not Ava, but Airman Serrano in the address field, like Lena had deliberately chosen the lowest possible form of military address, even though I was an officer. The insult was precise. Airman is E1 through E4. I was O3. The difference wasn't subtle. I held that invitation and understood exactly what it was, a calculated message that I'd been demoted in their story. That regardless of my actual rank, they decided I was beneath them. My father saw it. "You're not going." "No. Neither am I." "Dad, I don't support humiliation dressed up as family obligation." He took the invitation from my hand and put it in the trash. "You focus on your career. Let them focus on theirs. See who's still standing in 10 years. I didn't attend. My father didn't attend. Uncle Tomas went, then called me afterward sounding uncomfortable. It was. He searched for words. It was very focused on rank. Lots of talk about Reed's position, his trajectory, what it means to be married to a major select. Lena gave a speech thanking him for elevating her into military culture. Sounds perfect for them. Ava Mija, she mentioned you. Said something about how not everyone is built for the officer lifestyle, and she was grateful Reed recognized what he needed. I absorbed that. Thanks for telling me. I'm sorry. Don't be. She's showing everyone who she is. I'm just done pretending not to notice. Social media became a documentary of their life. Every promotion milestone, every formal event, every ceremony where Reed wore his dress blues and Lena wore designer clothes, and they both wore expressions of people who'd won something important. The captions were always vaguely inspirational. Hard work pays off. Success recognizes success. Building our future together. I stopped looking after a few months. Stopped checking their pages, stopped listening to family updates, stopped letting their performance infiltrate my reality. They wanted an audience. I refused to be one. Reed made major at 29. 04. Fast, but not unprecedented. He was competent, political enough to make the right connections, smart enough to avoid obvious mistakes. Lena posted a photo of his new rank insignia with the caption, "My husband, the major." Proud doesn't begin to cover it. I was 31 by then. Still a captain, which was normal. For promotion boards were competitive, and I was on track for my look the following year. But in Lena's narrative, I was stagnant. Stuck. Left behind while they climbed. Dad got sick 2 years after their wedding. Nothing sudden, just the slow accumulation of age and stress and genetics catching up. Hypertension, cardiac issues, declining kidney function. He started needing regular appointments, medications, adjustments to a lifestyle that had been regimented by 3 decades of military discipline. I took leave to help him through the worst of it. Drove him to appointments, managed his medications, made sure he was eating properly and resting when he should. Lena called occasionally, asked how he was doing, promised to visit soon. She rarely did. When she did visit, she talked about Reed's career. About their house. About the officer's spouse club she'd joined. About everything except our father's health or what I was doing to manage it. Dad noticed. He always noticed. Don't waste energy resenting her, he told me one afternoon while we waited for a cardiology appointment. She's living a performance. That takes all her energy. She doesn't have any left for real things. Real things like her father dying? I'm not dying today. But yes, like that. I held his hand in that waiting room and realized that the only family that mattered was sitting right there. Not the sister who'd chosen status over substance. Not the ex-fiancé who'd chosen image over integrity. Just this man who'd taught me what it meant to serve something larger than yourself, and who was facing his decline with the same dignity he'd brought to everything else. He stabilized for a while. Good days outnumbered bad days. I got promoted to major myself at 32:04, exactly on time, exactly where I should be. Dad was there for the ceremony. Lena sent a text, "Congrats. You're catching up." I blocked her again. It was becoming routine. Reed made lieutenant colonel at 33:05. Ahead of schedule, but not impossibly so. Some officers climbed fast. Some had mentors who pushed them forward. Some knew how to manage perceptions in ways that accelerated their trajectory. Reed was all three. Lena's posts became unbearable to the few family members who still followed both of us. Aunt Marjorie called me after one particularly egregious update where Lena had posted a photo of herself wearing Reed's rank insignia as jewelry. "She's wearing his silver oak leaves as earrings," Aunt Marjorie said, horrified. "Is that even allowed?" "It's tacky, but not illegal." "Ava, honey, she's making your father's illness about herself." The last post was about how stressful it is to support family while managing an officer's household. "Your father barely knows she exists." "I know. You're the one doing everything." "I know. I just want you to know that we see it. The family sees it." I appreciated that. But being seen didn't change the reality. I was still the one sitting with Dad through his bad days. Still the one managing his care while advancing my own career. Still the one choosing substance over story. 3 months before Dad's final decline, he had a good week. Clear-headed, energetic enough to sit outside and watch aircraft take off from the base we could see in the distance. "You stayed true," he said. "That's the only promotion that matters." I didn't understand what he meant then. Thought he was just being philosophical, maybe medicated, maybe emotional. Now I understand he was telling me that integrity outlasts performance. That the choices I'd made to serve honestly, to build character instead of image, to prioritize real things over appearances, those were the choices that would matter when everything else fell away. He passed 6 weeks later. Quietly, in his sleep, after a final day where he'd been surrounded by people who loved him for who he was rather than what he represented. I stood outside the hospital afterward, alone in the parking lot under Nevada stars, and felt something shift. Not grief. That would come later, in waves, in unexpected moments. But clarity. Understanding that I'd lost the person who'd taught me how to be myself, and now I had to prove I'd learned the lesson. I walked to my car with that weight settling into place. Knowing that Dad's funeral would force me into proximity with Lena again. Knowing that she'd perform grief the way she performed everything else. Knowing that I had to decide who I was going to be in that space. I chose myself. I chose dignity. I chose to honor my father by being exactly what he'd raised me to be, someone who understood that real respect comes from character, not from the story you tell about having it. The funeral planning started immediately. I was next of kin by default, the daughter who'd been present, who'd managed Dad's care, who had his advance directives and his wishes documented. But Lena inserted herself the moment she heard. "I'll handle the arrangements," she announced over the phone. "You've been doing so much. Let me take this on. I have everything under control. Ava, you can't do everything yourself. Besides, there are optics to consider. Dad was a chief master sergeant. This funeral needs to reflect his rank properly." Optics. Of course. I'm aware of his rank, Lena. I've been military my whole life. I know, but I've been managing high-level military functions through Reed for years now. I know how these things should look. I let her help because fighting her would cost more energy than the help was worth. She took over coordinating with the honor guard, arranging the reception venue, creating the program. I focused on the eulogy, on gathering photos, on informing Dad's old colleagues and friends. We stayed in separate lanes until the day before the service, when Lena called with a new concern. "I need you to make sure your uniform is properly pressed," she said. "We can't have you looking mid-grade." I was a major. Oh, 4. Mid-grade was exactly what I was. But she said it like an insult. "My uniform will be appropriate. I'm just saying, there will be senior officers there. Reed's bringing some of his colleagues. First impressions matter. This is our father's funeral, not a promotion board. Everything is a promotion board when you're married to a lieutenant colonel, Ava. You'd understand if you..." She trailed off. "If I what?" "Nothing. Just make sure you look sharp." I hung up before I said something I'd regret. The truth was, I had someone in my life Lena knew nothing about. Colonel Daniel Hayes, 06, 15 years older than me, with a career that spoke for itself and a personality that didn't need to. We'd met at a joint task force briefing 18 months earlier. He'd been recently widowed. I'd been recently promoted to major. We'd started talking about leadership philosophy and hadn't stopped. We'd married quietly 6 months ago. No announcement, no social media, no family notification. Just a small ceremony at the courthouse with 2 witnesses and a commitment that felt more solid than anything I'd experienced before. Daniel understood service in a way Reed never had. Understood that rank was responsibility, not identity. That marriage was partnership, not performance. I hadn't told my family because my family had proven they couldn't be trusted with information that mattered. Lena would have turned it into content. Aunt Marjorie would have meant well, but shared it with everyone. Uncle Tomas would have brought it up at inappropriate times. So I kept it private. Daniel and I built our life quietly, away from people who confused sharing with connection. Dad knew. I'd told him a month before he passed. He'd met Daniel twice, approved completely, and said only, "Don't let Lena make this about her when she finds out." She won't find out. She will. And when she does, remember, her reaction tells you about her, not about your choices. Now, standing in my quarters the morning of the funeral, I looked at Daniel in his dress blues, full colonel insignia, ribbons from deployments and commands, the bearing of someone who'd earned every bit of rank he carried. And I understood what Dad had meant. "You ready for this?" Daniel asked. "To bury my father or to deal with my sister?" "Both. I'm ready to honor Dad. Lena's performance is her problem." He kissed my forehead. "I'll follow your lead. If you want me to stay background, I'll stay background." "No," I said. "You're my husband. You belong next to me. Whatever reaction that causes is on them, not us." We arrived at the chapel 30 minutes before the service. The honor guard was already in position, 6 airmen in dress uniform, standing at attention, ready to carry a chief master sergeant to his final rest. Inside, the chapel was filling with Dad's colleagues, my colleagues, military members from across multiple generations who'd served with or under him. Lena arrived 20 minutes later in a black dress that probably cost more than my monthly housing allowance. Reed was beside her in his dress blues, lieutenant colonel rank gleaming, silver oak leaves catching light. And on Lena's lapel, pinned like a brooch, was Reed's full colonel insignia, the silver eagle that denoted 06. She was wearing his future rank as jewelry. At our father's funeral, I watched her work the room before the service, touching people's arms, accepting condolences with practiced grace, introducing herself as Chief Serrano's daughter, married to Lieutenant Colonel Mercer. Always the rank. Always the status. Always the performance. Daniel stood beside me, quiet and observing. He'd spent 30 years in the military. He recognized exactly what he was watching. "She's playing a role," he said softly. "She's always playing a role. You're not. I'm my father's daughter. That's the only role that matters today." The service was exactly what Dad wanted. Military precision, personal remembrance, respect without excess. I delivered the eulogy, keeping my voice steady through stories about a man who'd taught his daughters about integrity by living it rather than lecturing about it. I didn't mention Lena specifically, but everyone who knew our family understood which daughter had learned the lesson. At the reception afterward, Lena held court near the refreshments table. She'd positioned herself where everyone entering had to pass her, had to acknowledge her, had to witness her grief. I stayed near the memory boards, accepting quiet condolences from people who'd known Dad as a leader and a friend. I saw Lena notice Daniel before she understood who he was. Saw her register the colonel insignia, the bearing, the age difference between us. Saw her mentally categorize him as probably someone's husband, probably here to pay respects, probably irrelevant to her narrative. She approached me during a lull in conversations. Reed was behind her, looking uncomfortable in a way I recognized. He knew something was about to happen, and he wanted no part of it. "Ava," Lena said, loud enough to attract attention. "I'm so glad you made it. I know how busy you are with major responsibilities." "I've been here the whole time, Lena." She glanced at my uniform, at my rank insignia, at the absolute lack of jewelry or embellishment I wore. "Of course. You look appropriate. Very by the book. That's generally how military funerals work." She laughed, artificial and performative. "Still so serious. Dad would want you to relax." She fingered the eagle pin on her lapel. "Per you, though. Still single after all these years. Still working your way up. I got the man and the status. Some of us just have better instincts about these things." Several people nearby had stopped talking. They were watching this interaction with the kind of horrified fascination usually reserved for car accidents. I looked at my sister. Really looked at her. Saw the desperation under the designer clothes and borrowed insignia. Saw how much energy it took for her to maintain this performance. Saw how empty she'd become while trying to appear full. "Have you met my husband yet?" I asked calmly. Her face froze. "You're what?" Daniel walked over from where he'd been speaking with some of Dad's old colleagues. He moved the way senior officers move, no rush, complete confidence, undeniable presence. He placed his hand on my lower back, a gesture of support and partnership. "Lena, this is my husband, Colonel Daniel Hayes," I said. "Daniel, my sister Lena and her husband, Lieutenant Colonel Mercer." The room had gone completely silent. Every military member present recognized exactly what had just happened. 6 outranked 05. Colonel outranked Lieutenant Colonel. Daniel outranked Reed by a full grade, which in military hierarchy was not a small difference. Lena's face went white. Not pale, white. The kind of color drain that happens when reality fundamentally contradicts the story you've built your entire identity around. Reed stiffened to attention slightly, the automatic response to a senior officer, before catching himself and offering his hand. "Colonel Hayes. I didn't realize you were." "Family," Daniel said simply, shaking his hand. "I'm sorry for your loss. Chief Serrano was a remarkable man." "Yes, sir." "Thank you, sir." The sir was automatic. Protocol. A lieutenant colonel addressing a full colonel. But in this context, with Lena standing there wearing a borrowed eagle pin while facing an actual colonel who'd earned his rank through 30 years of service, the word carried weight beyond mere courtesy. Lena hadn't moved. Hadn't spoken. Just stood there processing that I, the sister she dismissed as stuck, as single, as lesser, had married a man who outranked her husband. Who outranked her entire performance. Daniel, to his credit, didn't gloat. Didn't posture. Just treated them both with the same professional courtesy he'd extend to any lieutenant colonel and spouse. But his presence did all the talking necessary. "Condolences, Lieutenant Colonel," Daniel said to Reed. Then to Lena, I understand you've been managing the arrangements. The service was well done. She nodded mutely. Daniel guided me away then, back toward the memory boards, leaving them standing there with all their assumptions shattered. I heard Lena whisper something to Reed. Heard Reed respond with something sharp. Heard the beginning of an argument that had probably been building for years, but now had a catalyst. I didn't turn around. Didn't watch. Just walked away with my husband beside me, knowing that my father would have appreciated the precision of that moment. Not because it was revenge was beneath him, but because it was truth. And truth, he'd always taught me, was the only rank worth holding. The reception continued for another hour. I stayed the entire time, accepting condolences, sharing stories about Dad, being exactly what he'd raised me to be, present, respectful, real. Lena left early, claiming a headache. Reed stayed long enough to be professionally appropriate, but the discomfort radiated off him in waves. I didn't see them leave. I was talking to Chief Master Sergeant Martinez, one of Dad's closest colleagues, who was telling me about a deployment where Dad had personally mentored him through a leadership crisis. Your father didn't care about your rank, Martinez said. He cared whether you were learning, whether you were growing, whether you understood that leadership was service, not privilege. He taught me the same thing. I can tell. You carry yourself like his daughter. He paused. Not like some people who think being near rank makes them important. I knew he meant Lena. So did everyone else within earshot. 3 days after the funeral, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, then recognized the area code as local. Hello. Ava. Lena's voice, smaller than usual. Quieter. Can we talk? I'm listening. Not on the phone. In person. Please. I met her at a coffee shop off base the next afternoon. She was already there when I arrived, sitting in the back corner, no makeup, hair in a simple ponytail. She looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. Thank you for coming, she said when I sat down. You said you wanted to talk. Why didn't you tell me you were married? Why didn't you tell me you were sleeping with my fiancé before you married him? She flinched. That's not the same thing. You're right. Your secret hurt me. Mine just embarrassed you. Not the same thing at all. She stirred her coffee without drinking it. I didn't know he was a colonel. Would it have mattered if you did? That's not fair. Lena, you wore Reed's rank insignia as jewelry to our father's funeral. You announced to everyone that you got the man and the status. You've spent 7 years making my life your competition. So yes, it's fair to ask if rank is all that matters to you. She was quiet for a long moment. Reed's been distant lately. More critical. He keeps telling me I don't understand military culture the way other officers' spouses do. That I try too hard. That I focus on the wrong things. And you're telling me this because? Because I don't know who else to talk to. I burned every bridge getting here, and now that I'm here, I don't know what I was trying to reach. I looked at my sister, this woman who'd taken everything I'd valued and turned it into a costume, and I felt something shift. Not forgiveness. Not reconciliation. Just a clarity about who she was and who I was, and how those two people couldn't occupy the same space. I can't help you, Lena. I'm not asking for help. I'm asking if we can start over. Start over to what? Another version of you resenting me for having something you want? Another cycle of you taking things that matter to me and claiming you deserve them more. That's exactly what you did. You didn't fall in love with Reed. You fell in love with the idea of taking him from me. You didn't marry an officer. You married the status that came with being an officer's wife. And now that status isn't enough anymore, you're looking around for what else you can claim. She blinked rapidly. Tears, maybe? Or just frustration. I know I hurt you, she said. I know I was horrible. But I'm trying to be better. Then be better. But not with me as your audience or your mirror or your competition. Be better because you actually want to be a better person. How do I do that? Lena, I've been trying to teach you that our entire lives. I can't want it for you more than you want it for yourself. I stood up. She reached for my hand, then stopped herself. Are you happy? She asked. With him? With your life? Yes. Then I guess you won. This was never a competition. That was always just your story about us. I left her there. Walked out to my car, drove back to base, went about my life. Daniel was waiting when I got home, reading a briefing document in his methodical way, glasses perched on his nose. How'd it go? He asked. She wanted to start over. What did you say? That we're adults and we live with our choices. He nodded, put down the briefing, pulled me into the kind of hug that didn't need words. We stood there in our kitchen, this man who'd chosen me for exactly who I was rather than what I represented, and I understood what Dad had meant about character making rank. Lena called twice more over the next month. I didn't answer. She sent a text. I understand if you need space. I just wanted you to know I heard what you said. I didn't respond. Space wasn't something I needed. Space was something I'd chosen. There's a difference. The military grapevine being what it is, I heard through Aunt Marjorie that Lena and Reed were struggling. That he was up for colonel, but the board had passed him over. That he'd become more focused on his career and less focused on their marriage. That Lena had tried to join several officers' spouse organizations, but hadn't fit in because she treated every event like a networking opportunity rather than community building. I felt nothing about any of it. Not satisfaction, not pity, not vindication. Just a distant recognition that people who build their lives on image eventually have to deal with the foundation cracking. My own career continued steadily. I was selected for lieutenant colonel below the zone, promoted to O5 ahead of schedule because of my performance, my leadership evaluations, my track record of service. Daniel threw a small celebration at our house, just close colleagues and friends, nothing performative or excessive. When Aunt Marjorie asked if I'd told Lena about the promotion, I said no. My professional achievements aren't her business anymore. That's very mature of you, Mija. It's not maturity. It's boundaries. 6 months after Dad's funeral, I got a letter forwarded from his estate attorney. A sealed envelope with my name in Dad's handwriting, marked to be delivered after his death. I opened it alone in my study. Read his words carefully. Ava, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've survived your sister's performance at my funeral. I'm betting she made it about rank. I'm betting you handled it with grace. I want you to know that watching you become the woman you are, the officer you are, has been the greatest privilege of my life. Not because you succeeded by traditional metrics, though you did, but because you succeeded by the right ones. You chose character over image, service over status, truth over performance. Your sister will spend her life trying to prove she deserves things. You spend yours actually deserving them. That's the difference between you. Live your life for yourself, not as a response to her choices. You've already won everything that matters. Love, Dad. I read it 3 times. Folded it carefully. Put it in my desk drawer where I kept things that mattered. Daniel found me there an hour later, just sitting quietly. You okay? He asked. I'm perfect. Letter from your dad? He wanted me to know I'd won. And have you? I thought about that. About my career, my marriage, my life built on foundations that couldn't be shaken by someone else's performance. About choosing substance over story every single day. Yes, I said. I have. The next 2 years passed with the kind of steady progression that comes from doing your job well without needing external validation. I commanded a training squadron, earned distinguished graduate at a leadership school, built a reputation for competence that had nothing to do with who I was married to and everything to do with how I led. Daniel made Brigadier General, 07, which meant late nights, higher stakes, and responsibilities that would have crushed a weaker marriage. Ours got stronger. We understood something fundamental about partnership, that supporting each other's success didn't diminish our own. That rank was something you wore, not something you were. I saw Lena once during this period, by accident, at a grocery store near the base. She was in the frozen food aisle, looking at meal options with the kind of exhaustion that came from more than just a long day. Ava, she said when she noticed me. Lena. How are you? Good. You? Fine. Busy. She paused. I heard about Daniel's promotion. That's really impressive. He earned it. I'm sure. Another pause. Reed got passed over for colonel again. 3rd time. They're suggesting he might want to consider retirement. I didn't know what she wanted me to say, so I said nothing. I thought it would be different, she continued. I thought marrying an officer would mean security, status, a clear path. But it's just hard. And lonely. And I don't know who I am anymore outside of being his wife. Then maybe figure out who you are. That's easy for you to say. You've always known who you are. I've always chosen to know. There's a difference. She nodded slowly, like she was processing something fundamental. I'm sorry. For everything. I know I've said it before, but I mean it. I took something from you because I thought it would make me madder. But it just made me emptier. I believed her this time. Not because the words were different, but because she looked different saying them. Less performed, more real. I accept your apology, I said. But I don't know if we can rebuild what we broke. I know. Maybe someday. But not now. Okay. We parted ways there in the frozen food aisle, two sisters who'd chosen completely different paths and were finally, maybe, understanding the consequences of those choices. Aunt Marjorie called me a week later. Lena's separated from Reed. She moved back to Phoenix, staying with me for a while. Is she okay? She's processing. Realizing she built her whole identity around someone else's career, and now she has to figure out who she is. It's hard to watch. It's hard to do, I said. But necessary. She asks about you. Wants to know if you'd be willing to talk to her. Not yet. Maybe eventually. But not yet. Aunt Marjorie understood. The family understood. Even Uncle Tomas, who'd always tried to play peacemaker, understood that some breaks needed time and space before they could even consider healing. My career continued its trajectory. I made full colonel at 40.06, the same rank Daniel had been when we met. We celebrated quietly, just the two of us, over dinner at home. No social media. No announcements. No performance. Just recognition between two people who understood what the rank actually meant. You outrank Reed now, Daniel observed. I try not to think about it that way. But you do outrank him. By 1 grade. Not by character. That gap's wider. He smiled. Your dad would be proud. I hope so. 3 years after Dad's funeral, I received an assignment to the Pentagon. High-level strategic planning, coordinating joint operations, the kind of work that could position someone for brigadier general if they performed well. Daniel was already stationed there, which made the decision easier. We moved to Virginia. New command, new challenges, new opportunities to prove that I'd earned every rank I'd worn through competence rather than connection. Lena sent a card to our new address. I didn't know how she'd found it until I realized Aunt Marjorie must have shared it. The card was simple. Congratulations on your new assignment. I'm proud of you. No performance. No comparison. No status reference. Just a sister acknowledging another sister's achievement. I put the card on my desk. Didn't respond, but didn't throw it away either. Left it there as a reminder that people could change, even if the relationship couldn't recover. 6 months into my Pentagon assignment, I ran into Reed at an interagency briefing. He was there as a subject matter expert, still a lieutenant colonel, clearly near the end of his career. He looked older, more worn, like the weight of his choices had caught up with him physically. Colonel Serrano, he said formally when he saw me. Lieutenant Colonel Mercer. I heard about your assignment. Congratulations. Thank you. Silence. Awkward, heavy silence between two people who'd once planned a future together and now could barely manage small talk. I'm sorry, he said finally. For how things ended. For the choices I made. I thought I wanted what Lena represented. Turns out I just wanted the idea of it. Turns out wanting the idea of something isn't the same as building it. He nodded. She left me, you know. Filed for divorce. Said I'd never actually seen her, just what she could do for my image. Was she wrong? No, she wasn't. He looked at me directly. You deserved better. From both of us. Yes, I did. For what it's worth, you won. Reed, it was never a competition. That's what you and Lena never understood. I wasn't trying to beat anyone. I was just trying to be someone worthy of my father's respect. Did you succeed? Yes, I did. He walked away then, back to whatever presentation he was supporting, back to a career that would end without the rank he'd once expected, back to a life that probably looked nothing like what he'd envisioned when he chose status over substance. I felt no satisfaction. No vindication. Just a quiet certainty that the choices I'd made, to focus on character, to build real things, to honor my father's legacy, those choices had been right even when they'd been hard. The Pentagon assignment lasted 3 years. I performed well enough to be noticed, competently enough to be respected, politically aware enough to navigate senior leadership without compromising my principles. When the Brigadier General Promotion Board results came out, my name was on the list. 07. 1 star. 30 years of service culminating in flag officer rank. Daniel held me when I got the news, both of us understanding what it meant. Not just for my career, but for everything my father had taught me about earning respect rather than demanding it. He'd be so proud, Daniel said. I wish he could have seen it. He saw it before it happened. He knew who you were. The promotion ceremony was scheduled for 6 months out. Protocol, processing, formal recognition. In the meantime, I continued my work, continued building on foundations that had taken 3 decades to establish. Lena sent an email when she saw the announcement through Aunt Marjorie. Ava, I saw you're making general. I'm genuinely happy for you. Not because of the rank, though that's impressive, but because I know you earned it the right way. I'm in therapy now, working through a lot of things. Understanding that I spent our whole lives competing with you over things that didn't matter while ignoring the things that did. Understanding that I hurt you because I didn't know how to be happy for someone else's success. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect us to be close again. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what Dad tried to teach us. I see what you always understood and I always resisted. You were right about everything. About character making rank. About service over status. About all of it. I'm proud of you. I don't have the right to be, but I am. Lena, I read it 3 times. Showed it to Daniel. What do you think? He asked. I think she's finally figuring out who she is. Does that change anything for you? Not yet. Maybe someday. I paused. But I hope she finds what she's looking for. Just not through me. He kissed my forehead. That's generous. That's boundaries. My promotion ceremony happened on a clear morning at Joint Base Andrews. Full military honors, family invited, colleagues present. Aunt Marjorie came. Uncle Tomas came. Daniel's family came. My squadron members came. The people who'd supported my career through competence rather than connection. Lena didn't come. She sent flowers to the house afterward with a note. Congratulations, General Serrano. Dad was right about you. I kept the note. Put it in the same drawer as Dad's letter. Evidence that people could grow, even if the relationship couldn't heal. The reception after the ceremony was everything Dad would have wanted. Professional, respectful, focused on service rather than spectacle. Senior officers shared stories about working with me, about my leadership style, about the way I'd earned my rank through decades of consistent performance. Lieutenant General Williams, my new commanding officer, pulled me aside. Your father was a Chief Master Sergeant, correct? Yes, ma'am. He taught you well. You carry yourself like someone who understands that rank is responsibility, not privilege. That's exactly what he taught me. It shows. Keep doing what you're doing, Ava. The Air Force needs more officers who remember that. I thought about Dad standing in our kitchen 20 years ago, telling teenage me that respect was a practice, not a feeling. Thought about him crying at my commissioning because I'd chosen to serve. Thought about his letter telling me I'd already won everything that matters. He was right. I had won. Not in competition with Lena or Reed or anyone else, but in competition with every version of myself that could have chosen image over substance, performance over character, status over service. I won by becoming exactly who he'd raised me to be. Someone who understood that the only rank worth holding was the one you earned through integrity. 5 years after making Brigadier General, I stood in a different ceremony space receiving my 2nd star. Major General Serrano. 08. Commanding significant operations, overseeing thousands of airmen, making decisions that affected national security. Daniel was there, now a lieutenant general himself. 09. 3 stars, his own career trajectory steady and earned. We'd built a partnership that survived rank differences, deployment separations, political pressures, and every other challenge that broke weaker marriages. 2 stars looks good on you, he said afterward. 3 looks better on you. It's not a competition. I know. That's why it works. We understood something fundamental that Lena and Reed never had, that success wasn't a finite resource. That supporting someone else's achievement didn't diminish your own. That real partnership meant celebrating each other's rank without needing it to define your worth. Lena had rebuilt her life in Phoenix. She'd gone back to school, gotten a degree in counseling, started working with military families navigating transitions. Aunt Marjorie sent updates occasionally. Lena was dating someone outside the military, focusing on her own identity, doing real work that helped real people. We'd exchanged a few emails over the years. Nothing deep, just acknowledgments of major life events. She'd sent congratulations when I made Major General. I'd sent acknowledgement when she finished her degree. We were cordial, distant, and honest about the fact that some relationships don't survive the damage done to them. Do you ever regret not reconciling with her? Daniel asked one evening. No. Reconciliation would require trust, and trust requires consistent behavior over time. She's doing better, and I'm genuinely glad for her. But that doesn't mean I need to let her back into my life. Your father would understand that. My father taught me that. Reed had retired as a lieutenant colonel after being passed over for colonel the maximum allowed times. He'd taken a defense contractor job, remarried someone outside the military, and from what I heard through the grapevine, had built a quieter life that suited him better than constant striving for rank. I felt nothing about his trajectory except a distant recognition that people eventually find their level. He chased status and discovered it wasn't enough. I chased competence and discovered it was everything. The legacy my father left wasn't about rank or achievement. It was about understanding that character makes rank, not the other way around. That integrity outlasts performance. That the respect you earn through consistent service matters more than the respect you demand through position. I live that legacy every day. In how I led my airmen. In how I supported my husband. In how I made decisions that affected thousands of people. In how I carried myself through spaces where my presence challenged assumptions about who belonged at senior levels. Standing in my office at the Pentagon, looking at the 2 stars on my shoulder, I thought about 7-year-old me watching my father put on his uniform every morning with the same precision regardless of his mood or the day's challenges. Thought about him teaching me that discipline was choosing to do the right thing even when no one was watching. I'd spent 35 years in uniform learning that lesson over and over. Learning that the right thing wasn't always the easy thing. That building character was harder than performing it. That real rank came from earning respect one decision at a time over decades of consistent service. Lena had learned it too, eventually. Just through a much harder path. She'd built her identity on someone else's achievements and discovered that foundation couldn't hold. She'd performed status and discovered it was empty. She'd competed with me and discovered the only person she was actually competing with was herself. Now she was building something real. Helping people. Doing work that mattered. Finding her own identity separate from anyone else's rank or achievement. I was glad for her. Proud of her, even, in a distant way that recognized growth without requiring connection. Some stories don't end with reconciliation. They end with 2 people finding their own paths and acknowledging that those paths don't intersect anymore. That's okay. That's healthy. That's what boundaries look like when you choose yourself over performance. My father had taught me that too. That choosing yourself wasn't selfish, it was essential. That you couldn't serve others effectively until you understood your own worth independent of their validation. That real strength came from knowing who you were and refusing to compromise that for anyone's comfort. I walked out of my office that evening, past security checkpoints and protocol officers and salutes from airmen who saw my rank before they saw me. Daniel was waiting in the parking garage, already changed into civilian clothes, ready to go home and be just us rather than our positions. Long day, he asked. Good day. Ready to go home? Ready to go home. We drove through DC traffic, 2 senior officers who'd earned every bit of rank we carried, heading home to a life built on foundations that couldn't be shaken by other people's choices. We'd chosen each other. Chosen integrity. Chosen service over status. Chosen character over performance. And in choosing those things, we'd won everything my father had taught me actually mattered. Not because we'd competed with anyone else, but because we'd competed with every easier path, every shortcut, every compromise that would have been simpler in the moment but corrosive over time. Some people chase rank. Some people earn it. Dad taught me the difference. Life proved him right. And standing at 08, looking at a career built on 3 decades of choosing the hard right over the easy wrong, I understood that the only promotion that ever mattered was the one I gave myself, the promotion to being someone worthy of my father's respect. I'd earned that rank. And no one, not Lena, not Reed, not anyone, could ever take it away. And that's how one moment, at my father's funeral of all places, made every lie, every insult, and every betrayal fall apart in front of the people who needed to see it. I didn't plan revenge. I just lived my life, built my career, and chose someone who valued me, and the truth did the rest. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had someone underestimate you, only for reality to correct them? Did a betrayal ever end up revealing who people really were? And what would you have done in my place? Drop your story in the comments. You never know who you'll help. If you want more true stories about boundaries, respect, and leveling up after being written off, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications.